Thank you for joining us for this look at some of the best stories from KPBS News this week. I'm Jade Hindman. Coming up, San Diego remembers Pope Francis. See how local charities rooted in the Catholic faith carried on their tradition of service in light of the Pope's passing. And Escondido's library is on the move. Learn about its temporary home inside a mall as the library gets some overdue upgrades. And International Jazz Day is happening later this month. Musicians in Tijuana tell us about the love for jazz in Mexico that's still going strong. We start in San Diego, where the city wants to lower the speed limits of a handful of commercial streets. Andrew Bowen says the goal is to improve both safety and business.
Cars are zipping by on University Avenue in the heart of Hillcrest. It's one of the few streets in San Diego that will soon have a new speed limit of 20 miles per hour. Benjamin Nichols is executive director of the Hillcrest Business Association. He says the neighborhood depends on foot traffic.
And so having cars move slower through the neighborhood is safer. And I think that'll make people feel more comfortable when they're in the neighborhood, visiting with businesses. At the end of the day, Hillcrest is a walking neighborhood.
The City Council voted Tuesday to make use of a state law called AB 43 that gives cities more flexibility when setting speed limits. Nichols supports the changes, but he says speed limits are easy to ignore and that infrastructure like sidewalks, crosswalks, and street trees can be more effective at calming traffic and improving safety.
It's not just about signs, it's about the way you build things and the way you control all sorts of movement through the neighborhood.
Speed limits in California are typically based on how fast people actually drive, even if those travel speeds are unsafe. This can lead to a phenomenon called speed creep, when cities have to increase speed limits because speeding has become the norm. The council also voted to retain current speed limits on several streets across the city when it would otherwise have to raise them.
The law before AB 43 on typical street speed limits was absolutely backwards, and it encouraged drivers to act more dangerously, undermining safety.
City traffic engineers are also developing a citywide speed management plan due out later this year. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
We saw a series of rallies this week from Medicaid supporters targeting local members of Congress. One of those events took place in Santee, where people with disabilities had their voices heard. As Melissa May reports, they say they depend on the federally funded health insurance.
More than 100 disabled people, their family members, caregivers, and community allies rallied outside Congressman Darrell Issa's office in Santee.
Tell the congressman, hands off Medicaid. Put away that cutting blade. Hands off Medicaid.
Issa is one of 216 House Republicans who voted in favor of cuts to programs overseen by the Committee on Energy and Commerce. That includes Medicaid, known as Medi-Cal in California. Organizers say this is part of California's first statewide movement led by people with disabilities, urging Congress not to cut Medi-Cal funding.
We are hoping that we can humanize this issue. It's not a partisan issue. It is about human beings whose lives are and their life quality is at stake. And we're hoping that we can specifically convince people, and especially Congressman Darrell Issa, to oppose these cuts, to see the value of maintaining what we have in our communities.
Diana Pastora Carson with Disability Voices United says she is speaking up for those who aren't able to communicate what Medi-Cal means for them.
People's lives are on the line, people's life quality is on the line. People are going to be forced to go back into institutions when the cuts take effect. And so, some people say that we are overreacting, that we will wait and see what happens, but we don't have the luxury of waiting.
So as a proud disabled woman, it's really amazing to see our allies. Oftentimes it's really hard to have allies in the disability community.
Tony Saya is an associate professor at San Diego State University. She doesn't rely on Medi-Cal, but wants to show her support for people who do.
If we don't have Medicaid, it kills disabled people. This gives us access to in-home supports, the ability to get jobs, the ability to be active members of our community. So if funding is cut, that means we can no longer be in the community in a variety of ways. So we die. We go back to institutions.
Saya says a person working at the front desk in the congressman's office told the group he and his staff were not in the office to speak to them. KPBS contacted ICE's office for a reaction to the rally and received no response by our deadline. Melissa May, KPBS News.
And the Catholic Church will soon begin the process of electing a new pope. Jacob Ayer spoke with local Catholics about Pope Francis and how he'll be remembered in San Diego.
On a day of great mourning for the Catholic Church, Father Joe's villages in downtown San Diego came together and did what Pope Francis often preached, helping those on the margins of society.
His passing, this is bittersweet for us as Catholic, bittersweet in the sense that we mourn the loss of him, and yet we know that he's exactly where he wants to be.
They held a special Easter celebration, which offered joy and a chance to connect with others, despite the news.
He worked for the marginalized. One of the first things he did when he arrived at the Vatican, when he was elected Pope in 2013, was to make sure that the homeless around the Vatican, that they were caring for the homeless around the Vatican. And that's what we do here each and every single day. So
I feel the Pope and Father Joe right here. Their spirits are here, their compassion, their caring for people.
Kathy McKinley is part of the Ladies Guild, who volunteered at the event. She's a lifelong Catholic and has been a volunteer with Father Joe's Villages for 20 years. McKinley feels blessed to have had Pope Francis lead the church as long as he did, and noted that he died the day after celebrating Easter.
I was grateful for the timing, because what better day after the resurrection.
A few miles away at St. Mary Magdalene Church, Roman Catholic Diocese of San Diego's Auxiliary Bishop, Michael Pham, says the Pope's death is a great sadness for him and Catholics around the world.
Pope Francis, our Holy Father, had appointed me to become an auxiliary bishop for the Diocese of San Diego. So it's such a sentimental for me, learning that he had passed away.
He hopes Pope Francis's legacy, giving a voice to the voiceless, lives on.
And then he talked about or cared about the prisoners, who he would go there and wash the feet of on Holy Thursday. He mindful of the margins, like the immigrants, those people who are in need of welcoming.
Pope Francis also appointed San Diego's first ever cardinal, Robert McElroy, who was recently appointed Archbishop of Washington, D.C. McElroy will be part of the conclave to elect a new pope in the coming weeks. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
You can get a list of our most popular stories as a newsletter. Sign up at kpbs.org. Here are some from this week. Project 2025 lands in San Diego. In a 5-part Public Matter series, Amitha Sharma reports on what's changing and what's at risk. Border buoys face lawsuits in Texas. Now the Border Patrol might bring them to California. And how the new San Diego County proposal for a tax increase would work. April 30th is UNESCO's International Jazz Day. While San Diego isn't hosting official events this year, just across the border, Tijuana is keeping the spirit of jazz alive with roots deeper than you might think. KPBS video journalist Matthew Bowler takes us there.
Jazz, a uniquely American art form.
Doesn't matter where you're born, or the color of your skin, or how you worship. Through our instruments and songs, musicians of all ages tell stories bursting with passion about every conceivable subject.
That is jazz legend Herbie Hancock at the United Nations on the first International Jazz Day, April 30th, 2012. The now 85-year-old maestro led the charge to create International Jazz Day with the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO. Musicians and fans worldwide have celebrated jazz every April 30th for 13 years. But in our region, you'll have to head south to Tijuana to participate. There are no official International Jazz Day events in San Diego. But that's okay, because Tijuana has its own rhythm and deep connection to jazz.
We can see Herbie Hancock, we can see Wayne Shorter, Tony Williams, and Bill Plummer.
Jazz royalty in Tijuana in 1966. Arturo Arizon, a self-appointed Tijuana historian, shows off his tome, a book he self-published called Tijuana, 100 años de música. Tijuana's connection to jazz doesn't start there. For that, you have to go back more than a century to the early days of jazz itself. Ferdinand Joseph Lamotte, better known as Jelly Roll Morton, worked in Tijuana from 1917 to 1922, according to Arizon, at a bar called the Kansas City Bar, where he's thought to have composed his hit, Kansas City Stomp.
Here's Jelly Roll Morton's visa to work in Mexico.
Decades later, another icon found inspiration in Tijuana. Arizon says world-famous composer and bassist Charles Mingus was going through some hard times and spent a month in the Mexican city. The city inspired him.
And he spent a full month in Tijuana getting drunk. I'm telling you, not only, but he listened to the mariachi bands and he listened to the bands in Mike's and other places. And he recorded songs like Isabel at the Table. The mariachis. And The Gift, in Spanish, Los Regalos. And then he says that's the best record he's ever made.
Another Tijuana bassist making waves, Marco Renteria, plays bass in the world-famous rock band Caifanes. But he loves jazz too. Renteria is humbled when anyone calls him a jazz musician.
For me to be able to call myself a jazz player, I have to be able to live in New York and play any standard in any key and any time and any odd meter. That's the level there.
Renteria is playing at the Museo del Taco for International Jazz Day.
Let this be a tribute for the people who dream.
That's Natalia Velasquez, head of the Tijuana Jazz Society. Velasquez says she organized the concerts, jam session, and master classes to pay tribute to the genre and city she loves.
It's such a good and rewarding thing for myself to be able to say I love my job.
Renteria says Tijuana is full of brilliant musicians ready to soak up new music.
The people here is hungry to listen to different music, and they're really respectful. I have a lot of friends here that are really, really talented.
If you can't cross the border but still want to enjoy Jazz Day in Tijuana, the April 26th concert will be live streamed on ojazz.tv. Whether you're in the crowd or watching from home, International Jazz Day is a chance to celebrate music that crosses borders and brings people together. Matthew Bowler, KPBS News.
For more KPBS arts coverage, stream our newest podcast. It's called The Finest, and it's hosted by arts reporter Julia Dixon-Evans. You can listen at kpbs.org/thefinest or listen wherever you get your podcast. The city of Escondido's public library will relocate as part of a major upgrade. Jacob Ayer tells us about the library's temporary home.
Hundreds of thousands of pages of paper and a wealth of knowledge sit within the 45-year-old Escondido Public Library, but April 26th is the last day open for a while. Before it closes for some significant infrastructure repairs for roof leaks, HVAC system failures, and an aging interior, says Library Director Reno Landa.
The main changes will be to restrooms for ADA compliance, new lighting, so we'll brighten up the space. We're going to reconfigure some of the areas on this first floor to make it more people-friendly. So instead of gigantic book stacks, we'll have shorter ones.
While there will be some limited services offered next door at the Pioneer Room for the next month, in late May it's supposed to reopen, on a temporary basis in a space that's rather unconventional. The first floor of the North County Mall.
So we have probably closer to 150,000 items that'll be moved.
Decade-long library volunteers Georgia Chonko and Amy Brown say they need book donations to continue at the mall to fund library programs. But they say the benefits of the library upgrades outweigh the inconveniences of the move.
Well, it'll be bigger and better and more climate controlled, right?
Yeah.
So for now, it's a 2-for-1 deal if you want. Go shopping and borrow a library book, all in the same place.
We are going to offer as much as we can. There is going to be some shrinkage because obviously we're going from about a 40,000 square foot building down to around 15,000 square feet spread across 2 primary locations and then some staff support areas around the storefronts.
The project is primarily funded by a $10 million state grant through the California State Library's Building Forward program. Construction is expected to last through spring 2026. After that, everything that got moved to the mall will be brought back into the new and improved Escondido Public Library. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
Growing cash crops in the U.S. means using fertilizer and accepting the environmental damage that comes with it. Now, some research at San Diego's Salk Institute shows a way to help plants to consume nutrients already in the soil. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge has more.
Fertilizer on farm fields doesn't all stay there. A lot of it is washed into streams, bays, and the ocean, causing algae growth, blocking sunlight, and stealing oxygen from aquatic creatures. Can science provide a solution? Here at the Salk Institute, researchers believe they have found a way to make farm plants less dependent on fertilizer. The key is an activating molecule found in plants that creates a symbiotic bond between plants and a soil fungus. The fungus becomes embedded in the plant's roots and delivers soil nutrients to the plant in exchange for carbon that the plant pulls out of the air. Plant biologist Lena Mueller says they have learned to synthesize the molecule and give plants more of it by adding it to the soil where it's absorbed into the roots.
And we found that this molecule, when we apply it, for example, it amplifies the symbiosis. So roots become a lot more colonized by the fungus when that molecule is added.
Plant roots derive nutrients from the soil all by themselves, of course, but the fungus, called arbuscular mycorrhizal, does it a lot better. Mueller and her Salk research team have done their experiments with a legume that's similar to a soybean plant.
This is our little legume that we work with, and it looks very sad here because we don't give it a lot of nutrients because we want it to interact with a fungus.
Once that interaction takes place, the plant becomes a lot less sad. They found their leaves contain 200% more of the nutrient phosphate. Mueller says 80% of plants can perform this interaction with fungus that boosts plant nutrition. These include corn, wheat, rice, and soybeans. The question is whether the engine that drives that interaction, the molecule she identified, could be increased in those varieties of crops.
We could test if our already existing varieties that have been bred for yield, if they would be susceptible, or if that molecule would work on them. And that would be really exciting.
Could fungal symbiosis actually eliminate the need for fertilizer? Mueller says probably not, but just reducing fertilizer use would be a strong step in the right direction. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
The Trump administration froze federal funding to several programs that promote DEI. KPBS education reporter Katie Anastas tells us about the upgrades to San Diego City College's planetarium made possible by federal funding for Latino students.
Since 2014, San Diego City College students have had astronomy classes in a planetarium.
I think I really like the experience in the planetarium. I would say it's
the part of my day that I look forward to on my Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Then we have the molten hour board.
Professors look forward to it too.
Having taught astronomy in a planetarium and for many, many years without one beforehand, I can't imagine going back to not having a planetarium anymore.
Lisa Will is a physics and astronomy professor. She taught the first astronomy class to use the college's planetarium in spring 2014.
What I remember the most from that day was a student said, it's good to see City College finally getting what it deserves. And I think what that student really meant, it's good to see the City College students finally get what they deserve. They deserve the best equipment. They deserve a room that excites them, that makes them want to come to class.
More than a decade later, it's no longer the best equipment.
One of the projectors takes about 25 minutes to warm up as opposed to the other projector, which is still working fine, but they don't manufacture these projectors anymore, and you want to have matching projectors in a planetarium system. And so it's still working, but every time I boot it up, I'm kind of worried that this will be the day that it doesn't.
Will knows just how good the planetarium could be. She's also the Fleet Science Center's resident astronomer. There, she can easily access data from agencies around the world, like NASA and the European Space Agency. New software would also allow her to show constellations from other cultures, like the Kumeyaay.
There are beautiful stories to tell across different cultures, and when I show them the constellations, I try to include that. But the constellations that we're showing have the 88 stories that basically are connected to the constellations that professional astronomers use.
That kind of cultural relevance is something City College has been working to incorporate throughout its classes. Administrators realized the outdated software limited those efforts. So they got permission from the U.S. Department of Education to spend some grant funding focused on Latino and low-income students in STEM on the planetarium. School leaders say improving the planetarium aligns with the mission to make science more accessible.
Well, the reality is that a lot of our students doesn't have the ability to go into the field, or to do field trips, ever since the K-12 system, right? So not all of the schools had the same access to field trips of hands-on science education. So here at the City College, we are really lucky that our faculty and our dean envisioned to have a space that could provide hands-on learning without leaving campus.
In February, the San Diego Community College District's Board of Trustees voted to spend more than $400,000 from that federal grant on the planetarium. The agenda item said they should spend the funds as soon as possible, since federal funds supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives could be frozen. Diaz Carrasco says the funding for the upgrades is secure.
For our particular grant, again, it's meant to support low-income and Hispanic or Latino students, and we haven't received any legislative action that says that that mission is going to change. So we have been instructed to continue the work as we have been doing it.
Will says it's important for federal funding to support public resources like the planetarium.
I think sometimes the general public hears of these data sets or these missions and they don't feel a connection to them, but they are owed the right to witness them, they're owed the right to see that data because they paid for it, and it's theirs.
The fifth and final year of the grant begins in October. Diaz Carrasco says she doesn't expect that funding to be pulled as long as they continue to follow the parameters approved in 2021. It's helped City College expand STEM tutoring, counseling services, faculty development, and research opportunities for students.
And they are transferring to four-year institutions. They are being recognized in national conferences, so we wanted to continue to do that type of work regardless of who funds it.
The new planetarium equipment is expected to be installed in the fall. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
All right, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That famous quote is from anthropologist Margaret Mead. KPBS reporter John Carroll tells us about a group of people doing just that, neighborhood by neighborhood.
I live right down the street here, and I'm a graphic designer.
You could also call Ocean Beach resident Aaron Knoll a community activist, at least as of 2018.
Especially over the summer, I would see lots of tourist trash accumulating here, especially since we live at the beach.
So Knoll decided to do something about the litter. He sat down at his computer and put his graphic design skills to work.
I made this map of the town, and put my adoption of my street on there, and I said, who else wants to join me? It took 2 or 3 months, and our whole town was turned green. OB adopted immediately.
And so Street Stewards was born, neighbors coming together once a month to pick up litter.
Then I discovered Street Stewards right during the beginning of COVID in 2020, and I said, this is what we need up in Escondido.
Scott Horst is now the co-director of Street Stewards. He's in charge of setting up street steward groups.
We have what we call captains. And captains are people, street stewards in individual communities that promote the program within their community.
Picking up litter is a good way to get out there and get some exercise, find, do something good for my community.
That's Escondido resident Mike Avila. Horst recruited him to lead the Escondido Street Stewards. We caught up with them as they cleaned an embankment next to the Escondido Creek Trail.
What we all have in common is that we have a passion for cleaning up our environment. And when we're coming together, friendships are definitely made.
One thing the street stewards like to point out is this is an activity for everyone, including age groups, those of us who are not so young, right down to the very young.
And I like helping people out, so I just thought I could try.
At just 8 years old, Zeth Escobar is the youngest member of the Escondido group.
Yeah, it feels good to know that our world's clean.
There are now about 1,000 street stewards spread across 10 communities. Null and Horst want to grow the group to where the entire county is covered. $35,000 in grants from the county is helping them to do that. It allowed for the creation of an interactive website where people can go to adopt a block. The green areas are blocks that have been adopted. The yellow represents areas adopted a couple of months ago that might need fresh attention. The long-term plan is to take street stewards statewide and then to the whole country and beyond.
What we really need is a phone app. That's what we really need. And phone apps are a lot more expensive than I thought they would be.
Several $100,000, says Horst, but the street stewards are on their way. Remember Margaret Mead's words about a group of committed citizens changing the world. John Carroll, KPBS News.
We hope you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Jade Hindman. Thanks for joining us.